You know, if you look at the various revealed religious traditions, they all have the idea of progressive revelation. So, for example, if you were a Christian, you are going on Jewish prophecies concerning Messiah and Lord of Hosts. Different figures, different missions. But let's start with the oldest of the known religions, and that's Hinduism, which is between 6 and 8,000 years old. There's a quote from Lord Krishna. He says, "In every age, when evil and injustice abounds, do I take physical form and walk with men, succoring the good, thrusting evil back, and seating virtue on her throne again." Now that gives us a sense that there is a return. The I, the singular I of Lord Krishna, is what we call in the Baha'i faith the manifestation of God. We also believe they are all one and the same. Now let's go to some of the other faiths. They are expecting in Hinduism the immaculate reincarnation of Lord Krishna, or the 10th avatar. Buddhists expect the 5th Buddha. Zoroastrians, the Shabaram. The Jews, as we said, the Lord of Hosts and Messiah. The Christians, the second coming of Christ. The Muslim, the Qaim, the 12th Imam, etc. So the concept of progressive revelation is built into every one of the revealed traditions. What happens in the writings of Baha'u'llah, who was the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, he explains this in greater detail and actually traces in one of his most important works, the Book of Certitude. He traces the various prophets in the Western line, that's Judeo-Christian Islam. Okay, he tracks that and he gives us an understanding of what their mission was. Now the term progressive will give us a clue as to what it's really about. For example, if we come from a Christian background, Jesus said, "There are many things I have yet to tell you which you could not bear or understand. But when he who is the Spirit of truth is come, he shall guide you unto all knowledge." The second Imam of the Muslim faith, Sadiq, said, "If all knowledge is represented by 20 and 7 letters, all that had been revealed up to and including Muhammad is 2. But when the Qaim arises, he will cause the release of the remaining 25. So progressive means according to our capacity, as Jesus said, not according to the knowledge or the ability of the messenger of God. So it's imagined that all of history is like a school, and the messengers of God are like teachers in that school. If we're in grade 1, they will address us at our level of capacity, what in education is called our adaptive range. Now humanity has come up the ladder of history, going through these successive stages, each one representing a new threshold in spiritual evolution, social evolution, intellectually development, etc., till we come to the 19th century. Now we have faced a different challenge, because up into the 19th century we had achieved social unities from the family right up to nation. In the 19th century, however, nationhood had taken a rather dark turn, and it became what was called nationalism. So we had the wars of nationalism, and nationalism by then eventually came to mean maneuvering for comparative advantage. Baha'u'llah appears in the middle of the 19th century, then Persia, now Iran, and he talks about the next threshold, which is internationalism, or the recognition of the oneness of humanity, and that requires cooperation for mutual advantage. So the old way is an adversarial, a confrontational one. This new age requires unity, coordination, collaboration. There's a statement of Abdu'l-Baha, who was the eldest son of Baha'u'llah. He says, "Society functions on the principles of cooperation and reciprocity." And if we look at that one very carefully, it's not in any way at odds with what Jesus said when he was asked if we are our brother's keeper, and the answer was a definitive yes. Except that in this age, we have a much higher capacity to not only understand the essential oneness of the human race, but to implement that oneness and all the principles that are required right across the board, both in education, in art, in economics, in governance, in the status of women, etc., etc. So progressive revelation is not at all at odds with any of the revealed traditions. As we said earlier, it's built right in. We happen to have arrived at the age long foretold in all of the world's traditions, the age of unity, of justice, and of peace. It's a challenge. Revelation is itself a struggle, as Baha'u'llah says, or a test. And what we're going through in the world today is really that stage in humanity, going from adolescence to maturity. Not without tensions, not without resistance, but that's what we're involved with. It's a fantastic age in which to live. You hear this very often, I know, and there are a number of people, we have to be clear about this, there are a number of people in the world who are not at all religious, but they are spiritual. And so a person will say, I'm a good person. Okay? Why do I need a new religion or a new faith? The answer is this, okay? Every ethic that we have existing today, even amongst people who don't call themselves at all religious, has its origin in some religious tradition. Whether it's the Ten Commandments, whether it's the, it doesn't matter. Now, to be a good person is not simply to avoid doing bad things. That's a negative, okay? So it's not what I don't do that makes me a good person, it's what I do do. Secondly, every one of the faiths that we talked about earlier is called either a way or a path or something similar. Christians were followers of the way, Hindus twofold path, Buddhists the middle path, and the path gives us an idea. The path presumes motion. There's a goal. It's taking us somewhere. Number two, it has sides. It has parameters, if you want. Narrow is the path. Now, the path in every age is the revelation sent down from God. Okay, why do we need this revelation? Because that's what's behind the question. We need the revelation so that we have an authoritative source as to what the will of God is for this age, as well as those spiritual disciplines required to transform the individual, who then has a responsibility of assisting in transforming the society. These teachings have changed over the ages, not the spiritual ones, they're fundamentally the same. But, again, going back to what we said earlier, our capacity is increased. So imagine the truth is a light bulb. We have 100 watts, we have 200, 500, 1,000. It's all truth, it's all light. But the intensity has increased because we have the capacity, the spiritual, if you want, visual ability to see more. So the social teachings may change, the laws of divorce, some of the spiritual traditions on fast, on prayers, etc., etc. But most significantly, what a revelation does in its own time is give us a picture of what the will of God is, or the requirement of that age. So, for example, Baha'u'llah says, be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age in which you live, and center your deliberations on their exigencies. Now, if Terry Spratt goes off on his own and gives a prescription as to what the world should be doing, who am I? By what right do I presume to know? The world is full of people, of great intellect, by the way, who may have an idea as to which way the world should go. In the last 2 centuries, we'd had every variation on the theme in terms of experimentation economically, artistically, and we're still going through it, education. But how do we know where the balance is? Let me give you an example. There are a number of movements, or if you want, recent developments, recent in human history. One is the equality of women. Another is the awareness of the environment. Another is kindness to animals. Yes, we have those principles, but not one of those principles has remained unified. In women's equality, we have 3 schools. In kindness to animals, we have 2, animal rights, animal welfare. In environmentalism, we have the extremes. Even peace, okay, at the founding of the United Nations had 2 schools of thought. Not that they disagreed on the ideal of peace, but they disagreed on the ability or the practicality of realizing it at that stage in history. So what we get in the Revelation is not only a prescription for living that applies to the individual, but it gives us a roadmap for the society as to what will keep us in harmony with that which is best for us as human beings. Okay, let's go back to if we want Christian roots, we can do this in Islam, we can do it in every one of the faiths. And that is, in the Old Testament, it says, for everything there is a season and a time under the heavens. Everything. Nothing lasts forever. In this prophetic tradition to which we earlier referred, there is the promise, okay, of a new revelation. And that's not simply a nice idea. It's an absolutely inevitable and necessary step. What happens is, and Baha'u'llah compares it to the seasons of the year. The springtime, he refers, for example, in the middle of the 19th century to the divine springtime having come, and that is the arrival of a new sun, the sun being a symbol of a new day. But that sun reaches its high point, we call it Byzantium for Christianity, the high point of Islam when they led the world in physics, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, centers of learning, etc. But that comes to an end with autumn. Autumn is the fading or the withdrawal of the spirit, to be followed by a winter. And it's in this autumn and winter of these faiths that you see the misunderstandings creep in and sometimes absolute corruptions. For example, in studying world religions some 25 years ago, they listed at that time 3,000 sects within Christianity. Now, how did we get from one Christ, one book, to 3,000? It wasn't Christ's fault. Now, the Baha'i says, it is not the characteristic of the shepherd to disperse the flock. The flock wanders on its own. So for everything, again, going back to school, there is an absolute requirement to keep moving forward. If we don't keep moving forward, we will actually start to unlearn. And we actually start to corrupt that which we supposedly knew. You mentioned that Christians don't get along with Muslims. Well, actually, in Islamic history, the first example of religious diplomacy is Muhammad guaranteeing protection to people of the book. The people of the book were the Jews and the Christians. They didn't have this. We happen to see all kinds of, if I could call it, Looney Tunes behavior today, which is a total corruption of the writings of any of these faiths. Well, what we're witnessing is the rise of secularism, and it's a particular kind. It's materialism, consumerism, all of this falls in place. They follow one another. What you're really getting at is the fact that on the one hand, the people want freedom. They want individual choices, okay? And on the other hand, when something bad happens in the world, they blame God. They blame religion. They blame everything, okay? Well, you can't have it both ways. We either have free choice, free will, or we don't. There's a writing of Baha'u'llah. It says, every good thing comes from God, every evil thing comes from yourselves, did you but know? So we don't have to start blaming God, however we define God. Now, historically, God has been the recognition of what the philosophers will call the prime mover, the uncaused cause. That agency, that entity, undefinable, infinite in its characteristics, that brought into place what we call creation, and therefore humanity. So when people reject God, it reminds me of a person I once knew when I was first a Baha'i. He used to say when he met someone who was an atheist, he'd say, what kind of God is it that you don't believe in? And then they'd try to explain and he'd say, oh, well, I don't believe in the kind of God you don't believe in either, which was a kind of a backhanded way of saying, what do we mean when we say God? Whose construction, if you want, or concept is this? Because God, throughout the centuries, has been unattainable in terms of our comprehension, And the only way we can understand God is through his messengers, his manifestations. Okay, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man goes to the Father save through me. Well, we're at it. That statement is meant to be an exclusive. Some people interpret that, there's nothing other than Christianity. Well, he also said, I am the Alpha and the Omega. And then you get other references from messengers. Before Abraham was, I am. I am Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. See, from a Baha'i perspective, they are the perfect mirror that reflects the same sun. The mirror moves throughout history, okay? It's like the days of the week or the months of the year. And you can have a Christ, you can have a Muhammad, you can have the Baha'u'llah for this age. You've had Zoroaster, you've had Buddha, different parts of the world, but it's the same sun. It's the same sun that gives the light and the heat, which is the knowledge and the love of God for that age. Okay, and we need to understand what true faith is. You know, Abdu'l-Baha says faith is not about rituals, traditions, or even beliefs. It's about teachings, how we live. In other words, the most critical part of every faith is the ennoblement of the individual to a level of spiritual behavior wherein we as human beings recognize the fundamental oneness of the human race, and we are here to care for each other. This is the oldest, one of the oldest questions in religious history. It is the struggle to move from one dispensation to the next without rejecting the previous one. I come from an Irish Catholic background, and the question occurred to me, am I being disloyal? Because the two things I understood well as a Catholic was authority and loyalty. And it was only when I went back to understand my Christian roots that I understood where true authority lies, and loyalty is to Christ also when he returns. That's part of the covenant, okay, that we have with Christ. You cannot become a Baha'i and reject the other messengers. As a matter of fact, people in the world coming from whatever background will pick up a belief in the messengers that they had never before acknowledged. In my case, Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, and Muhammad. I had never acknowledged any of those before I was a Baha'i. So not only do we not reject people, we accept them as part of what we call a belief in divine unity, which is that there's one God, all of them derive their inspiration, their authority, their teachings from the same source. Let me give you the reference to which you referred. They said to Jesus, when shall these things be? And he gave his very, very famous answer, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give its light, the stars shall fall from heaven, then shall the Son of Man come on the clouds of glory. Now, the age-old problem, okay, that we've had is not what the messenger said. It's what did he mean. We talked earlier about having 3,000 churches within Christianity. How do we get from 1 to 3,000? People started to interpret things differently, or they emphasize one teaching over another, okay, to the exclusion of the others. If we take the quote that we've used literally, the sun shall be darkened, there is no life possible on this planet any further without the sun, okay? The moon shall be darkened, the stars shall fall from heaven. Is that possible, that stars physically fall from heaven? The messengers speak in figurative language, in symbolic language, and it's deliberate, okay? It's quite deliberate. It is to test our sincerity. Those laws that we need to understand, all of us understand, are explicit, Baha'u'llah says. But those others are implicit. In other words, we have to ponder them. And it is only if we have a pure heart that we will understand the depth of wisdom in these, if you want, figurative expressions of the manifestations of God. So the sun, okay, is the religion, the influence of the revelation. It shall be darkened, okay? It's no longer exerting its influence. The reason we have wars and crime and you name it, oppression and tyranny and poverty and injustice and inequality still existing with us is because the influence of previous suns has not there. They have darkened. The moon is the laws. By the way, these terms have many meanings. I'm just giving a few that I'm aware of. The moon is the laws. Who's obeying the laws? Okay? Who's obeying the laws of whatever faith? Okay? The stars are the religious leaders. They fall out of fame. If you fall into disrepute, people no longer trust them for whatever reason. Okay? The other side of that is we live in an age when there is no longer, Baha'u'llah has abolished the clergy. So I'm here as one individual, just giving my somewhat limited understanding. It's always limited, okay? And there's no clergy. Well, if there's no clergy to control or to enforce behavior, that means humanity has reached an age of maturity where the conscience, the spiritual conscience of today is one that applies the teachings to itself. It's not socially reinforced or imposed. So no one asks me if I say my prayers. No one asks me if I fast, when I did, etc., etc. So it's a different age. So the sun is darkened. The laws, okay, the leaders have fallen. Then shall the Son of Man come in the clouds of glory. There was a famous minister in the United States. His name was Miller. And this is 1843, 1845, when in Christianity and Islam you had the Adventist movement. The suggestion that the time was ripe from both Christian and Islamic prophecies for the return, the second coming of Christ, which Baha'is hold Baha'u'llah to be. This man took his followers up into the Appalachians because he was waiting for the Son of Man to come in the clouds. It didn't happen. They dispersed and reformed as another sect that is still with us today. But if you're waiting for someone to arrive on the physical clouds, if that were to happen, Baha'u'llah, if these literal prophecies happen, there would be none left to question. We would all be dumbfounded, okay? Never mind the stars falling, but if there was a figure on a cloud, of course. But remember that revelation is always a test. God never takes away our free choice. We are left to decide for ourselves. Okay? So the clouds represent veils. If you look at a veil, and I'll give you an example. A veil is something that from a distance, okay, you can't see through. If a woman is wearing a veil, or I'm wearing a veil, I can see you, you can't see me. You can't see my face. I can see you because I'm close to it. Okay, I can see through it, it's close to me. You can't. You have to get up very close to see through a veil. And that's what we're required to do in our religious search, in our independent investigation of truth, another of the central teachings of Baha'u'llah. The veils are those things like traditions. You know, I was born into this family. It's connected with a nation, etc., etc. All of these are veils. That's the challenge. Why did they release Barabbas, a murderer, instead of Christ? That doesn't make any sense. Unless there is such a hostility, such a resistance to even entertaining the notion that it has happened again. In 1893, there was a World Congress of Religions in Chicago, the first one. There was a bishop of that who got up and said, you know, the first time around we missed it. There's a good chance we missed it again. It was at that conference that the Baha'i faith was first mentioned in North America. Okay, this has happened again recently by another clergyman. There are many clergy, by the way, who have become Baha'is. The notion that Baha'u'llah, God forbid the term, is an antichrist. Let's go back to what Jesus said, okay? He shall glorify my name. Go to the Writings of Baha'u'llah, okay? He shall speak of me. Go to the Writings of Baha'u'llah, page 86 of Gleanings, you can find it, okay? The other thing is, he said, a good tree doth not bear bad fruit, nor a bad tree good fruit. I came to the Baha'i faith looking at the principles. You mentioned this earlier. They're rational. They make sense. They're obviously modern. This is not a rejection of the old. It's a recognition we are at a different age in human history. We are at the age of maturity, and we have to behave maturely. Now, if you're going to suggest that an Antichrist is going to teach independent investigation of truth, abolition of poverty, education for all as a compulsory right, the equality of women, the harmony of science and religion, a world government that fosters peace, this doesn't make any sense. It's against any notion of, if you want, the dark side that we've ever had. So, but it's not new. Every one of the manifestations, in spite of the prophecies that they were to come, in spite of our praying that they would arrive, when it happened, we didn't want it anymore. And what we have to do is ask ourselves the question, why? Why? Because it requires change. It requires that we see past tradition, see past that I was born into this or that family, see past the social refusal, if you want, of the larger community to even entertain the question. It has always been thus, and that's why in every age it's usually a small band of pure-minded souls, not necessarily the most educated of the time, who will lead the way, because it is the purity of heart that counts. Okay, first of all, when Jesus said that, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no man goes to the Father save through me. That's the reference. At that time, there were two kinds of believers. There were what they called deists. They believed in God, but they didn't need the messengers. And theists. They believed in God through the messengers. So, for example, if you're Jewish, you're following Abraham and Moses. What Jesus is confirming in that statement is that you cannot go to God directly, go off in a corner and meditate and get your message directly from God. You need to go through the manifestation of God. Okay? Now, in Islamic terms, Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. This is their objection. Yes, agreed. Baha'u'llah says the prophetic cycle is verily ended. But there's a difference between a messenger and a prophet. A Nabi and a Rasul, okay, in the terminology. One is a prophet who foretells, of which we have two kinds in the Western line. The prophets that Baha'u'llah describes as not endowed with constancy. That's Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, etc. They didn't bring a new book. They appeared within Judaism to reinforce it. Then you have those prophets, the major prophets, what we call the manifestations of God, who come with a new book, a new set of laws. Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, and for this age, the two blasts of the trumpet, this God's call to man, the Bab, which means the gate, and Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God. So, again, we've had the same kind of resistance that we've always had. In one of the writings, Baha'u'llah says, those who have rejected him from generation to generation. It doesn't mean that the same people are reincarnating. He means that for the same reasons, with the same excuses, we get the same resistance. That's what he's talking about, okay? So, it's not the final anything. This is unfortunately true, but in every case, we have, okay, we'll accept Abraham and Moses, and that's the end of it. Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, that's the end of it. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, that's the end of it. Why do we do this? We do it because we are forced to change, to give away our teddy bears, if you want. I could say the whole Mass in Latin, and I had to give myself a serious shake to go back to my own Christian roots to look at what Jesus said. What did he say? Did he promise there would be a second coming? Did he or did he not say, I go away and come again unto you? If I do not go, the Comforter shall not come. It's there in black and white. It's there. No one disputes this. But they will put a different spin on it. And where they get this spin from is who knows. I don't want to get into that. But it's very clear in Islam, Christianity, and all of the other revealed traditions that the hand of God is not chained, as Baha'u'llah says. There will continue to be revealed truth. And he says very clearly, this is not the final revelation. There will be another one. And who knows? Jesus said, many are called, few are chosen. What did he mean? What the responsibility is for the individual is, if you hear, in other words, you hear the call, the responsibility for a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, is under the covenant of that faith. I had a covenant with Christ to obey his teachings and also to accept him when he returns. That's part of the same covenant. So my responsibility, therefore, is to listen, at least listen, to the claim of Baha'u'llah, to investigate it fairly. And Baha'u'llah in his own writing says the same thing. Be fair in your judgment. That's all he asks, is that we investigate fairly, that we get rid of ego, that we get rid of things which hold us back. Okay? The veils, as we referred earlier.